Good afternoon. I'd like to call the Health and Human Services and Aging meeting to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
As a reminder to all in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county YouTube page. Calling the roll for Ms. Conwell.
Present.
Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Sweeney is absent. Ms. Turner.
Present.
Mr. Miller.
Present.
Ms. Stevens. Ms. Stevens is absent at the moment. We have a quorum.
All right. I'd like to make a motion to excuse Councilman Sweeney, who is out of town. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Conwell, seconded by Turner. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. We do not have to excuse members, but we just do it as a courtesy. And Councilwoman Stevens is on the way. Is there any
Yes, Madam Chair, we have one person signed in for public comment. Lou?
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, Ms.
I'm
Lou.
glad to be here. A while ago, we did have a couple of comments here at the different meetings criticizing the funds which all county council members can actually have help on. Some people call that slush funds. Actually, we call that community grants. I think that's the term. However, doesn't matter this particular process is legal or not legal, but after so many different sessions, I have heard the contents and Q&As, I do have to appreciate all the programs presented here and with all your supports. We can tell county has been behind with the time. This is the reason why this particular way of helping the community actually should have been expanded. Instead of spending the money which people actually don't need, which actually has nothing to do with moving the whole county forward. For example, sorry to say that again, then new big county jail to hold more people. Or the projects will only benefit certain people, but not all the people in the county. Wish you guys all do a good job again. I'm looking forward to hearing more of these programs. Unfortunately, they may not be as big, but they are actually affecting each and every resident in our community. Doesn't matter it's a good neighborhood or not too good neighborhood or even very poor neighborhood. We need something like this to lift everybody up out of the holes, instead of only benefit certain people with their strange agendas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Liu. That's very much appreciated. The next matter on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the September 21st, 2022 meeting. Can I have a first and a second?
I so move.
Moved by Miller, seconded by Turner. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. We have two items that are referred to the committee today, two resolutions, and we will have a presentation after from the Collaboration to End Human Trafficking. So please stay and listen to that presentation as well. Madam Clerk, if you could read the first item into the record.
Resolution 2022-0332, awarding a total sum not to exceed $100,000 to University Hospitals Cleveland Medical Center for the Pediatric Sexual Assault Nurse Examiners Program from the District 3 Arpa Community Grant Fund.
Thank you. Who is here to speak to this? Please state your name for the record. Make sure the green light is on. Oh, you have to do it all in the mic.
Kathleen Hackett.
Welcome.
Thank you. See, can I advance? Okay, thank you so much. First of all, I want to say good afternoon to the committee members and thank you for your consideration for this important funding and allowing me again to speak with you today. My name is Kathleen Hackett. I'm the Pediatric SANE Program Coordinator for UH Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital. SANE stands for Sexual Assault Nurse Examiner. Okay, a little bit about our program. We focus solely on children's services. As a level 1 pediatric trauma center in Northeast Ohio, UH has the most specialized pediatric program in the region. We are embedded within the pediatric emergency room, serving ages 0 to 17. Hospital-based programs such as ours are available 24/7 and 365 days a year, and we are prepared to address a wider range of physical and psychosocial symptoms and challenges for this patient population. Each case costs on an average of $1,500 to $2,500 to complete, and we are reimbursed only $632 from the state. As you can see here, my data from 2021, we saw 225 patients in our pediatric SANE program, which has increased from the previous years and has remained high since COVID. There's a few reasons for this. First, evidence does show that sexual violence increases during states of emergencies. For example, sexual violence has increased by 45% during Hurricane Katrina and the recovery period following. Children are most vulnerable and isolated during those times and have no access to mandated reporters, such as teachers, coaches, and so on. My data supports that almost 99% of the time, the offender is someone who knows the patient, not a stranger. And then during COVID, we shifted from seeing those patients in our non-acute clinic, our care clinic outpatient services, to seeing the patients in the pediatric emergency department, which has strained our ED resources. However, treating non-acute patients in the pediatric ED has proven to be patient-centered, allowing more flexibility for the guardian to bring the child in, providing higher quality care, improving their health outcomes. Aside from the obvious reasons why a pediatric SANE program is so important, I want to note how imperative it is that the SANE staff be available around the clock. Because most unfortunately, our patients do present during the off-shift hours. That means during the evening and nighttime. It does not reflect from this slide, but my data from 2022 has confirmed that more than 40% of the patients we've seen so far this year were seen during the evening and nighttime hours, which again increases the strain if there's no SANE available to have the experience to take care of that patient. And also, a skilled SANE nurse conducting these exams will also help increase judicial outcomes for the patient and ultimately the community. This is how our funds will be used. I will begin immediately. I will not sit on these funds because they are so needed. I will begin recruiting a part-time trainee. Funds will be used to support the employee over 2 years, and mostly importantly, the funds will cover the extensive training that's required toward obtaining that national certification to becoming a SANE P, nationally certified. This would position UH to almost double the PED SANE program in eliminating gaps in coverage, which will have long-term positive impact on the community and the patients served. Additionally, the funds will support coverage in the event the SANE nurse becomes sick, takes PTO, or even retires. When the grant concludes, the funding will either be retained, the nurse will be either retained and funded by operational funds within our facility, or alternatively be reassigned in the pediatric emergency room. And if this were the case, however, she would still have that training, experience, and education to provide SANE services to those pediatric patients that present when there's no SANE available. So in conclusion, the Arpa grant of $100,000 will allow UH to recruit and extensively train a nurse to serve as an additional part-time SANE trained nurse, expanding our capability to serve the growing volume of patients we're seeing. The training and clinical hours will result in the nurse becoming nationally certified. The funds will enable the current SANE P, myself, the SANE P coordinator, to be flexible, help recruit and train more nurses into this specific and specialized program. Lastly, the hospital will be externally funded, allowing a runway period of 2 years to determine the impact of the additional SANE P nurse. Even if it's determined it not to be kept, her to be kept on in that capacity, having that additional training and experience is so crucial. I would also like to let you know our outcomes that we have set goals for ourselves. For the first year, at the end of that first year, the individual will be successfully trained, recruited, and then she will be able to provide SANE services without supervision. At the end of the second year, we anticipate an increase in reevaluation and follow-up for those patients with significant physical findings. And that concludes my presentation. Do you have any questions?
Yes, Ms. Hackett. How many nurses are SANE trained now with UH?
Currently, I have 3, and I only have 2 actively taking call time.
Okay, thank you. So this is definitely needed. I do remember you now when I came to UH and heard about the program.
Thank you.
And what was needed. I'm going to open it up to my colleagues. Any questions?
Pretty thorough.
Okay. And so my other question would be, you stated the 100,000 would be, this grant would accommodate 2 years?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't see any. Councilman Miller?
So I have a couple of questions. What are your intentions when the 2 years of this grant is completed?
Our intentions are hopefully for that nurse to be remain with our program and our facility to take over funding and the cost of that part-time nurse. If that is not possible, then that nurse will still be working in our pediatric emergency room and an excellent resource when there is no SANE available. It's very difficult in the busy emergency room when there's no SANE and the staff can be trained. They just don't have the experience and competence to take care of the complex issues of a child who's been sexually assaulted.
And Madam Chair, following up on that, could you describe a little bit more about how the services that the SANE nurse provides are different from what would otherwise be provided?
The SANE nurse has specific training in forensic science, and she interacts with the patient differently than a regular patient coming in. We have the time to understand what happened to the child, understanding the words they use, the terminology they use. We understand how to collect evidence without evidence being destroyed, which is very important if the case goes through litigation. We also have a better understanding how to maintain chain of custody, DNA, all of that. And then we have expert training on testimony. We often have to go to court and testify on behalf of that patient, which a regular emergency room nurse can, yes, conduct, can read the instructions and do evidence collection. She does not have the training and expertise in forensic science, interacting with trauma victims in that way, and also understanding, determining medications, lab studies that need to be done to support the patient's health and well-being.
And Madam Chair, one additional question. Do the other major hospitals in Cuyahoga County have similar programs?
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I wanted to know what the recruiting process may look like.
Well, so we would within our system, we would have it documented. We have a system for job openings, so we would start there. But also, I have nurses that have voiced interest in the program and being able to work part-time. The great benefit of having someone there part-time and not just working their regular job and then taking call to come in, it's very difficult to work your job and then taking a chance on being called in. There's no balance, and it's very difficult for nurses to do that. Also, when nurses are called in, they respond to the hospital within about 45 minutes to an hour. So that's also difficult. That patient is sitting there waiting for us to come in. It would be better to have a nurse on site to interact with that patient immediately. It really does impact the emergency room. We have multiple patients needing beds, so the beds aren't being held. The patient can be addressed immediately. The family's concerns are addressed more immediately, and that's really the benefit. And then nurses have difficulty taking call time.
All right. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, other than I so appreciate the time that you've allowed for me today, and I thank you so, so much.
So if I can call for someone to make a motion on R2022-0332.
I move recommendation for approval on second reading.
Second.
Okay, moved by Miller, seconded by Turner. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, if I may clarify, was that second reading under suspension or?
It's not suspension, just
No,
to go
it's
to
a
second
ARPA,
reading.
so it has to go the full readings.
Thank you. And if I can call the roll for Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Thank you.
Present.
Thank you. Resolution 2022-0347, authorizing an amendment to a master contract with various providers for short-term emergency child care for children in the county's custody for the period September 1st, 2022 through August 31st, 2023, to extend the time period to July 31st, 2024, and for additional funds in the total amount not to exceed $12,750,000.
Good afternoon, David Merriman, Department of Health and Human Services. I'm here on behalf and with the Department of Division of Children and Family Services presenting a master service agreement with 4 providers. Shortly, I'll ask Marcos Cortez to come up and speak about the procurement. Jackie Fletcher will present on how the service is being used. And then we have representatives from each of the 4 organizations that are referenced here. I think as we bring them up or as you have questions, I'll remind each of them to please introduce themselves by name and which organization they're here representing. Before we jump into the specifics of the contract presented before you, I would like to just share a little bit of context for the service. This short-term emergency child care concept is something that has been brought to council on multiple occasions. This is, in essence, the 3rd procurement that we've done for this service. What makes this procurement different is that this time that we went out to bid, we did so jointly with the Board of Developmental Disabilities, the Alcohol, Drug, Mental Health Services Board, and the Juvenile Court, as well as Family and Children First Council. So although DCFS is bringing this contract forward, we actually presented the request to the community together. Those aligned systems help us write the contract and, write the RFP. Those aligned systems reviewed the RFP, and with us, they selected who would be the awarded recipient for the adolescent portion of the RFP. There are some significant changes in what we're proposing today, so I think we'll spend more time talking about the adolescent services. We're continuing to work with SAFI, Ohio Mentor, and Providence House, but those are service providers we've been utilizing for several years. So what I would say is the significant enhancement here is the center's proposal has been developed recently as the centers and Cleveland Christian Home have merged, if you will. And so this is a new service, and I'll allow Eric Morris to make a presentation on that when the time is appropriate. For us, what's exciting about that proposal is it introduces an effort to have no eject, no reject placement of children. And I think our goal as a county is to find the appropriate placement for every child, to find the setting where that child will thrive in. And what the centers is proposing is a short-term emergency child care option for those children, and they'll generally be adolescents. So what we believe we are achieving with this proposal today is a new level of service that we're quite excited to present today. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to organize the other aligned systems. They've all supported this process. And so although they're not here today, they are active participants. We review the contract and the service regularly, even though we're not using it, and we are talking about the best way to make it available for the community. So I'm going to pause there. I'm going to invite Marcos Cortez to come up, speak on the procurement. I'd also like to include Jackie Fletcher, and then I think maybe it would make sense for us to pause for questions at that time before the providers are brought forward, unless.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I just want to state for the record that that since my wife works for the centers, I'm going to recuse on this item. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I'd like to, so we could be working on the proposed substitute that is being spoken about. I'd like to make a motion to move the proposed substitute before us. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Conwell, seconded by Turner. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
So we are now discussing the proposed substitute
Now
And
allow,
one-
I'm sorry.
And one recusal.
with one recusal.
Thank you. And I do want to acknowledge a miscommunication on my part that presented that the initial version of the contract as being entirely funded by ARPA General Fund. That was inaccurate on my side. This was always intended to be a portion of it funded out of ARPA general fund, general fund that has been developed through the ARPA program. The balance of the contract will be charged to the Health and Human Service levy. We will be requesting reimbursement from other systems, and we will be requesting federal reimbursement. We've not written that into this presentation today because the biggest part of the service is new. We haven't done it yet, and I don't want to make a commitment as to how much reimbursement will be available.
So let me clarify, Mr. Merriman. There is a portion of ARPA dollars that will be utilized for this.
That's correct. There is a portion of the county executives' ARPA dollars.
And are you aware that with any legislation that we've presented with ARPA fundings, it will go its full 3 readings?
I'm aware of that.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Madam Chair,
Councilwoman?
so we don't know how much, Director, are you telling us we don't know how much ARPA money we're going to use?
To the councilwoman through the chair, we know how much we're going to use. We're going to use $6 million of ARPA funds. We don't know how much federal reimbursement will ultimately be available for this service.
Continue.
Good afternoon. Excuse me. Good afternoon. Marcos Cortez with Health and Human Services on behalf of Children and Family Services. It's always hard to come after David Merriman. He steals a little bit of my thunder. We all recognize there is a shortage of appropriate placements for children, not only locally, but nationally as well. This is evident locally with children having to spend nights in our child welfare office. This can become a disruption to daily operations. It can become a danger to staff, visitors, and other kids in custody. So we issued an RFP back in March, late March of 2022, and we had it open and we received 7 actual responses, but 4 were only deemed responsive to our proposal. And through our negotiations and through our review process, these were the 4 vendors that were recommended for awards. Of these 3, we've already heard our current providers, more recent providers, and the centers is a new provider. And again, we have representatives from each of those each of those vendors here to talk about their specific programs, as well as the centers presenting on their program. Interim Director Fletcher and one of her staff to answer any specific questions related to the program, and of course, Mr. Merriman for any additional questions.
All right, proceed.
Before we get to the providers, what I'd like to do is I'd like to invite the director, Jackie Fletcher, to come forward, share her thoughts about the service. And I know she's accompanied today by David Gray, so I'll let Jackie present what she'd like to share. I suggest we take a pause at that point, and then, but we could also move through all presentations and save time for questions at the end. So however you'd like to proceed, Madam Chair.
As we feel.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Jackie Fletcher, Interim Director, Division of Children and Family Services. I'm here with the Interim Deputy Director for DCFS as well.
My name is David Gray. Nice to meet you.
So again, as both Marcos and David mentioned, we continue to seek to improve every experience and outcome for any child that comes into care that must be placed in an out-of-home care setting. And again, with this emergency, short-term emergency care contract, again, we know we need a range of supports available for all of our kids. And we're often seeing kids with, again, multi-system involvement, ranging from our DD lens, our juvenile justice system, mental health, behavioral health, so many different areas that our kids come to us with. So we want to, again, make sure that we're expediting our children to the right place, the right time. And this is going to help serve in that gap for some of those kids that, again, we see that may linger a little longer than we like to see them in terms of our placement efforts. You may want to hear a little bit about how we place kids. David can speak a little bit to that if that's something you guys want to hear a little bit about.
Yeah, get an update. And that will include what we're currently going through, right? Okay.
So just some general information about the placement process.
Sharon, can you hear him?
Yep.
Pull it up to you.
So generally, when we're looking to place a young person, our most important part of the process is doing a comprehensive review of that youth's history. So we spend time, collaborating with our staff, gathering information, and making sure we have enough information to make an informed match if we're needing to secure a placement. Our preference and one of our values is to do whatever we can to keep youth within their family unit, if not as close to home within their natural supports as possible. And then if we are needing to look beyond that because of the youth's treatment needs, because of some of their history, some of the things that they may need special supports around, we have a whole system in place to determine what level of support a youth may need. From there, we work with some of our contracted providers to layer in those services, anything from foster homes to group homes, independent living programs, residential programs, intensive treatment programs. So for us, that's our immediate priority, is to make the first placement the best placement. However, as we've been discussing, there are times where that's not possible. There are times where we might not be able to make a match based on availability. We might not be able to make a match based on how the youth is presenting at the time and what the program's capacity may be to meet that need. Our goal, like I said, is to minimize placements, because we also believe that each placement is potentially a traumatic experience for the youth, to be in a different situation, forming new relationships, and finding themselves, in a sense, having to start over. So, like I said, our goal is always the quickest, best placement, but when that's not possible, we've been having to default to working with the providers that are in this contract and some of our previous relationships to come up with, a temporary, short-term option so that we can make sure that youth has as many supports layered in place as possible while we work on continuing to find permanent, appropriate placement for them.
Can you cover this particular legislation is for short-term emergency child care? What are some of the other placements for children?
Some of the other placements. Mm-hmm. So on our
just so the committee can know.
Absolutely, yeah. So on our boarding care contract, we have we're upwards in the 70s. I think we're getting close to 80 contracted providers. They are a representation of family foster homes, which would be for youth with needing a lower level of support and intervention. We have treatment and specialized foster homes. We also have group homes, and we have independent living programs. Sometimes there's a little bit of an overlap between those two settings, depending on the youth's age, depending on what their needs are, and depending on what we're moving them towards. We have providers that provide residential treatment, which is intended to be maybe a longer-term intervention to meet the youth's treatment needs, to get them in a place where they're stable to return back to the community. I would say, an average length of stay in those settings is between 3 to 6 months. We also contract with providers that provide intensive residential treatment, where there's an understanding that the youth has a higher need of care that would maybe be more beneficial for them to be in that setting as opposed to an open residential setting. And then we also have some partnerships with providers that resemble more of like a psychiatric hospitalization.
So how many was that? That was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, roughly around.
That would be the
including the
continuum.
short term, so probably about 8 different type of placements. that we have. Any questions in regards to that portion from my colleagues? All right, so this particular legislation as amended is doing a couple things, right, David? So it's extending the time period, and is it also increasing funds?
That's correct, Madam Chair. So there was an emergency contract executed at the start of September. That contract was executed to provide funding to these organizations, especially the centers, to enable them to begin the hiring process.
And that was 500.
Absolutely,
That went
yes.
through Border Control, I think, didn't it?
Actually, it was signed as an emergency contract. It was approved straight away. And so that contract was it actually did not end at the end of I don't believe it ended at the end of the year. It was that initial contract was presented as a 1-year, $500,000 contract. What's before you today, the amended version of the contract is adding the balance of the funds needed to have the services fully funded for a 2-year period. And so it actually is proposed here to end July 31st, 2024.
Okay, very good. And it's also inclusive of others beside the centers.
That's correct. So the SAFI, Ohio Mentor, and Providence House contracts there was already a contract with them that ended in the month of September. So they were already under contract. That contract has since ended, as they're now on this contract. So they are being asked to continue what they were doing and, in fact, grow some of their services to have more capacity.
Okay. So to be clear, the Board of Control contract just was that emergency funding for just centers, correct?
And we did not go to the Board of Control, so it was an emergency purchase contract that was just approved by the executive and signed by the council president. But that was
I get it.
Okay.
It's just in my mind, the dollar amounts go to Board of Control, but I'm hearing you. I'm just not saying it.
The emergency purchase, the emergency contract was with all 4 vendors.
Oh, okay. So we gave that was inclusive of all the 500,000 though. Okay. All right.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So how is this triggered from the very initial stages? I'm not behaving well. I have my biological parents have troubles with the system. One might be incarcerated. The other has trouble managing me, and I'm not easily managing myself either. And I'm 13. And so if I'm on the streets, is this triggered with me, or do I have to be picked up and at Janet and Hunter to trigger this?
So I'm going to ask Jackie Fletcher to come over to answer this as well. But what I would say, all of those are options. And unfortunately, there are an almost innumerable amount of variables and, unfortunately, circumstances that we must respond to. Generally speaking, we make placement from within the Jane Edna Hunter building, which is where our staff reside. And generally speaking, a child comes into our building, is assessed and is stabilized, and then David's team begins searching for the placements that he described. And when they're unsuccessful, they then are going to start looking at these 4 options if it doesn't seem like placement is immediate. Like we're going to be able to find a bed immediately.
So I'm trying to, from the taxpayer's perspective, because they actually watch us occasionally, they're at home going, so what happens that brings a kid to this point? So give me a couple of scenarios so that our constituents can understand better what happens that brings these kids to this position and what their behavior looks like.
Okay, so oftentimes kids come to our attention for, as David mentioned.
Director, state your name again.
I'm sorry, Jacqueline Fletcher, DCFS. Kids come to our attention for a myriad of issues. Again, families are having a problem. It could range from domestic violence to some issue with substance abuse, behaviors in school where caregivers, parents cannot manage or take care of the parental needs for that child. And so we often see kids come to us. We may have temporary custody. The courts have granted emergency custody. Some of the kids, we may have terminated their parental rights completely where we have permanent custody of those children. But as David spoke to, the kids that come to our attention, the majority of our kids that we have, we're able to either secure their placement with their parents, with another relative, or in a short-term foster care setting. That's the majority. The kids we're talking about here, roughly 5 to 10% of all of the kids we see may experience this delay because, again, they may have so many layers of trauma that includes, sort of being away from their families due to, again, all of those other issues I spoke to, that finding that right placement for them is causing a delay. Again, the placement crisis that we're seeing is not just being felt here in Cuyahoga County, it's across the state, across the country. So everybody's sort of struggling with this void of support available for kids who are either, like I said, multi-system involved. So they are experiencing challenges in school in multi-dimensional sort of areas of their life. And that right placement may take some time to manifest. So those are the type of kids that we're talking about here. Again, we are seeking to place them in the best placement option, least restrictive option. But if they're going to experience a delay by way, they're going to have to stay in this building, we don't want that to happen. That can't happen. So this is where we're trying to fill that void to make sure that they have a better experience, better outcomes.
So, Madam Chair, again, one of the things about being in our disciplines as administrators for years, we slip into jargon unintentionally. You said multi-system problems. What does that mean if I'm just sitting at home?
So in layman's terms,
Thank you.
all of our child serving systems, and I apologize for that, you have a juvenile justice system that, our kids sometimes have to engage in, depending on their behaviors in the community and such. We have our developmental disabilities system that some of our kids may or may not qualify for, that we're oftentimes seeking assessments and qualifiers to get those children.
So give us 2 disabilities that might place a kid bring them to our attention.
So one of them could be a child who is autistic. Oftentimes we're seeing autism, kids on the spectrum of autism that are coming in that we're trying to build some capacity in the community to serve those needs. We don't have a ton of resources for those kids, so we're oftentimes working with that system, again, to build those supports for a kid. We do have kids with attention deficit. You wouldn't think that that would be a challenge to the magnitude we're seeing it, but we are seeing kids that are struggling in their school, in the community. Their brains aren't always fully developed, so they're behaving in a way that all we can see as a community is the behaviors. We don't know what's behind the behaviors, and so we're struggling at times to respond to all of these layers of behavioral health needs, mental health needs, and again, I cannot stress enough the trauma exposure that our kids are seeing, whether, like I said, it's domestic violence, community violence, all of these different things that's happening that is causing all of the systems to try and respond appropriately.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sometimes people just don't understand what we're saying at home, and then I get a call. What did they really mean?
Right.
And it's easier if it comes from you.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Madam Chair, if I could just add one other point. I think Jackie talked about two scenarios with autism or ADHD. I do want to clarify, having a child diagnosed with those conditions does not lead to custody or DCFS involvement. I think you all know that, but to the councilwoman's perspective, if the public's watching this, I don't want there to be a misunderstanding. We tend to serve those families when the parents no longer have the resources or the ability to serve their own child.
That's the first premise.
Yes.
That a child doesn't end up in our care collectively.
Absolutely.
If mom and dad or the extended family, the grandparents, the uncles and aunts, all create a village where the care for that child is very supportive. We never see them. We never hear about them. They don't touch us. And we'd love for that to be more and more families. But when the family fails first, and then it comes to our attention because they're having problems at school or they end up with conflicts with law enforcement, and then we look at removing them from a family, or the family doesn't want them anymore. There are those ugly cases where parents don't want their children. We don't like to talk about them, but you know more about them than I do.
Councilwoman, you're spot on. I think for us, the first action is always to see, does the children even need to come into custody, and to try to address whatever is going on in the home. I think if they are going to come into custody, our first goal is to find out, is there a second parent? Are both parents involved? And if there is not an option there, then see the rest of the family. And if there's not an option within the family, to see within the community. And if there's not an option within the community, to see is there a foster home. Jackie and David and their team, they do an amazing job of assessing each and every one of these children and finding out what level of need they have, and then searching for a placement to meet that need, with an eye towards having the least restrictive placement. And by that, I mean the placement that is going to be most home-like for the child, but still safe for the child and safe for the community.
Thank you, Director.
Yes, and I'd just like to point out, me and David have spoken about this numerous of times, so we are moving as a county in that direction to be more preventative and assist families before children actually get into our care. It's just, we got sidetracked with all this emergency housing stuff, that not having enough placements, but we are moving in that direction to actually put some funding and help before that family dynamic breaks up and comes to us, because all data shows it's better for the child to remain with their family. So
I totally agree. And I know at a later council meeting today, there's a discussion about Say Yes. There was just a great article last week on Say Yes to Education, where they talked about how some of the family support specialists found family members that we didn't even know about, and took two siblings from a police case into a family member's home, totally diverting them from our custody and our care, which in some ways is the system working.
Not only is the system working, it's so good for those children to have an alternative to system care.
Yep, I totally agree.
And it costs us less. Collectively, we put a lot of money into these programs, but a family member, that's a wonderful investment in someone who will be probably more productive as an adult than if the system had to hold their hand.
I agree.
all right, any other discussion in regards to this contract?
So Councilwoman Conwell, I don't know if you want to hear from the different organizations. They are here. I know that the Centers has prepared a PowerPoint. So I guess what I would propose, I'll ask Jackie to come up and introduce, or David to introduce SAFI, Ohio Mentor, and Providence House first, just so they can introduce themselves and they can share a perspective from their agency. And then I'd ask to give Eric a few minutes to be able to walk through the center's proposal, because I think there'll probably be some questions for him.
No, I always like to give everybody an opportunity that comes down to share.
Good afternoon. Nisha Gilmore for SAFI.
Good afternoon. My name is Kate Malone. I'm with Providence House.
Good afternoon. I'm Chip Bonsuda with Ohio Mentor. Good afternoon. I'm Nora Conway from Providence House.
Welcome.
Okay.
Yeah, let's bring Ohio Mentor up. I haven't met him.
We have actually been providing services for the children of Cuyahoga County since about 1983, and we are a treatment foster care provider within the state of Ohio. Our largest number of foster homes that we have are in the Northeast Ohio area, and we did sign on very early with this program to provide short-term and emergency respite for children that are basically were stuck down at the county building, and that we could provide 3- and 5-day beds for those kids as we looked for other options within our system, but also looked for other options within the greater provider system for these young people. Primarily, they've been teenagers. We have been serving on an average anywhere from 3 to 10 kids a day in this program over the last couple of years that we've been doing it. And it really has provided some of our foster parents an option to do something a little different for them, because this is not really what people go into foster care to become. They look for ways to extend their family to become a foster parent. And we have some very dedicated foster parents who have said, no, I'm going to serve kids on a very short-term basis and provide a safe place for them as we find the next treatment option. So we've been very blessed to have those families, and we've been very blessed to have this contract, because I think it has served children in Cuyahoga County very well in its short period of time.
Do you assist the DCFS with, once the kids come in for 3 to 5 day stays, do you assist with trying to find them?
Yeah, we look within again, we have a larger foster care system within this. I think we serve anywhere from about 360 kids a day from Cuyahoga County in our foster care network. So we look at the various homes that we have and matching children, because it really is finding the appropriate placement. A bed in one foster home does not mean it's appropriate for that child that happens to be in an emergency placement. And it really is it's a clinical process of matching a child. A lot of times people look at foster care like it's the Holiday Inn. It's not the Holiday Inn. It's beds that have to be appropriately matched with the child and the other children that are in the home and the family and the community that surrounds them.
That's good that you guys assist us with that. Do you have siblings? Do you get many siblings?
We do get SIB groups, not so much in this part of the program, but we do serve a lot of SIB groups. Actually, we probably statewide 3 or 4 SIB groups a day that are referred to us. And they range, most of our SIB groups are about a SIB group of 2, but we see 3, 4, 5, 6. I can remember some 7 and 8 SIB groups being placed within the system. It is a greater need. It's more of a challenge. It's sometimes finding a home that's big enough to serve a SIB group is not always the easiest thing with the state standards, but we do see a lot of SIBs.
Foster families are, in your opinion, are they decreasing?
Yes, we need more and more. Right now, if we would double all the foster parent families in the state of Ohio, and I think there's 7,000, we wouldn't even come close to touching the need. Just by doubling it, it doesn't even come close. And it's just not in Ohio. I'm responsible for programs in multiple states, and we see the same thing in other states as well. We need far more foster parents than we currently have. Far more.
That many children need places.
Absolutely. We get 100 referrals a week in Ohio alone.
And so the kinship hasn't really put a dent in it?
It has on some of the maybe the family foster care programs, but not the treatment foster care programs. Treatment's a little different. The state is also now going down a different path a little bit on treatment foster care and developing 3 tiers of foster care. And I think that's going to may put some challenges on finding foster homes, particularly at the highest need level. But it really is, we can't find enough good people to do this. It really is. It is, if you know anybody, have them call me, because we really are constantly looking for good foster parents. And we spend a lot of money recruiting for foster parents, and we spend a lot of efforts with our staff recruiting for foster parents. I have a very large group of staff that's their sole purpose is to find foster parents. We've gotten some grants from the state of Ohio to do some very unique advertising on Hulu and Hallmark channels to look at different ways of trying to get people to be involved in the system and provide foster care.
Thank you. Can you leave your card with Sharon, our clerk?
I would, but I don't carry a card anymore. So yes, I can give her, she has my name, I'll give her my email. How's that?
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair, before we move forward, I want to ask a question that will replicate for
from the
each of them.
Oh, yes.
When you spoke about foster parents, you said that some of them have skill sets and others, different families have different skill sets, I think was how I absorbed it anyway.
Well, at different wants and needs. As a foster parent in Ohio, you have the ability to make a choice of what age child you want, what gender child you want. You can even be asked what race child you want, which is a unique thing on that. So you really do have an opportunity. You, in a sense, if you would look at a foster parent, they're an independent contractor. And in a sense, they can make a decision and a choice of who they wish to have in their home. So it really does become, you have this complete list of all these foster families out there.
To the cohort of children we're talking about here, they have special needs,
Yes.
every one of them. So how do your foster parents identify themselves as being willing to take these short-term
These are foster
emergency?
parents that have a great deal of experience. Some of the foster parents in this program have been foster parents for 25 years.
So you're looking
They have also been highly trained. We have to provide tons of training for foster parents at the front end, but also during their course of treatment with us. We provide.
So is there a specialized training for the
We do have
children with
specialized
these
trainings
layered-
for all the populations that David talked about and Jacqueline talked about.
So not only you, but across the board,
Yes.
everyone will have some specialized training?
Yes, we provide, I mean, on any given day in our organization, there's a training offered to foster parents on, you pick a topic, or in the course of a month
So
we're doing
I'm
it.
trying to focus in on the short-term emergency
Yes,
cares.
we have
where
special
we
things,
know
special needs, special focus around children that have been trafficked, children that have been involved in other forms of sexual exploitation, children that have drug addiction issues, children that have episodes of physical violence, children that have been victims of physical violence.
And children with mental health
And
issues.
children with mental health. We have mental health therapists on staff. We have behavioral therapists on staff.
So these individual foster parents have specialized training
Mm-hmm.
and where they don't have a skill set and they've taken, absorbed this child on an emergency basis.
Yes.
Will they get immediate access to a counselor?
Yes.
For
If-
that?
If that is the case and the plan for that, we've even sent counselors down to the building at Jane Anna Hunter to meet with kids prior to them and talk to them when they don't want to leave the building. We provide that too as well.
And how many foster parents do you think will be willing to accept out of your cohort of parents?
Right now, we have anywhere between 15 and 25 families that provide this service. We have some families that provide it on a regular basis. We also provide a similar service to the insurance companies. CareSource has an insurance similar model with us, that for kids that live with their parents, that they have a respite program and an emergency program for the weekends for some of these kids. So it's a growing area. When you look at foster care, you think of long-term, and it's really becoming shorter and shorter term. About 33% of the kids we see are discharged from us in 30 days in a foster care model now. And that's holding true across most other agencies, most of the other larger agencies in the state. It's a changing field, primarily because the residential programs are gone. If you would go back 15 years ago in this area, there's probably 500 beds for residential kids. They're all gone.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Welcome, Kate.
Afternoon, Chairwoman Connell, members of the committee. As I said, my name is Kate Malone. I'm the Government Relations and Public Policy Advisor for Providence House, and I'm joined today by my colleague Nora Conway, one of our family services managers, and one of our tremendous social workers who engages our children and family every single day. So any specific questions about the children and the families, I would direct to Nora. But as a brief overview, Providence House is a crisis nursery. We've been in operation for 41 years in Cleveland's Ohio City neighborhood. We have 30 beds there, and in that 41 years, we've served over 13,000 children and families in Northeast Ohio. As you may know, we are in the process of constructing and hope to open our new 20-bed crisis nursery in the Buckeye Shaker neighborhood sometime next year in 2023, and we decided to do this to meet the growing demand of the families in the area. We serve children, or we can care for children in our facility newborn to age 12. That's per our state licensing, but our sweet spot is really children newborn to age 5, given the methods we use and our expertise in that age group. We have been an EPP partner with DCFS since April 2019. As part of that contract, we reserve 2 beds for 24/7 admission for any child within that newborn to age 5 group that needs placement. And we can care for them for up to 14 days. Typically, it's 2 to 4 days on average. Last fiscal year, we cared for 13 children through the EPP and for 86 days of care. I think for the most part, this has been a mutually beneficial partnership with the county for us. We appreciate the opportunity to continue to partner with DCFS, and most importantly, to care for children in Northeast Ohio. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. As I said, anything directly related to programming, clients, children, I would involve Nora here. But thank you.
I want to go back where I just went with
Go right ahead.
Ohio Mentor. How many children in this cohort can you service at any one time?
So through the contract with DCFS, it's up to 2 kids. At times, we can go a little above, maybe 3, but we have to keep 2 beds open.
Okay. So, and this would be at the facility over on the west side? 'Cause
Correct.
It's been a few years, but I wandered
Yep,
through there
still
once
there.
through Leadership Cleveland. So now with the facility on the east side, will that be restricted to newborns and toddlers?
That will be the same age group once we are open, newborn to age 12 currently.
Okay. So will you be able to extend or expand your capacity?
Once we're open in Buckeye Shaker, we would love to extend our contract.
Okay. And how do all of your children are on site? So who has special training on site? And are they there exclusively for these children, or do they have additional responsibilities?
Sure. So all of our staff, admin staff, childcare staff, are trauma-informed care providers. So we all take trainings, each year annually, alternatives to restraint, that type of thing. So we all have to keep up on that training. And then we do have 3 different shifts of childcare staff. So they are there obviously 24/7 caring for the children in different shifts.
So if you're accepting kids up to 12, as was it talked about previously, these are kids with multiple layers of problems. So trafficking, as well as mental health issues, which can come from being trafficked. How do you deal with those if you accept a child and those things have been identified in their past as they're being transported to you, for example?
Sure. So, of course, being aware, first and foremost, of the trauma history, but because we have so many things in place, kids come in, new clothes, home-like experience, meals obviously per day. We have on-site programming, which consists of yoga, music classes, just keeping the kids in a space where it's safe and home-like is super helpful. And then as we work with different community providers, acknowledging things kids have been through, we can help DCFS workers make outside referrals. But the kids we see in our traditional nursery, that's kind of a different interaction with the parent or guardian.
How many children can you? I forgot to write that down.
That's fine. It's up to 30.
And the 2 to 3 that you would accept through this emergency type of setting would be in these facilities, which max out at 30.
Correct.
Okay.
And I think they're age specific with us.
Yeah, so the contract is birth to 5. We could have opportunity to accept 6 to 12-year-olds, but I think it's case by case and would just depend.
So right now you wouldn't, if we were to transport to one of your single building, soon to be 2, we'd only see kids up to the age of 5.
Correct, in that moment, but, it'd be case by case. And if a sibling set came in and they, it was 2-month-old and then a 2-year-old and then they had a 6-year-old sibling,
You'd try to keep
we do our
together.
best to keep them together.
Okay.
Yeah,
Madam Chair.
and going back a couple of years, Councilwoman Stevens, there was before this emergency crisis happened, we needed additional placement, so we went into individual contracts with Providence House for the younger, and then Safi for the older children.
Okay. But this would allow some smaller families with siblings that hit both ranges to stay together as long as possible. I like hearing that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Providence House? Anything else you'd like to share?
Happy to be here and happy to be partnering with DCFS. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please state your name for the record, each of you as you speak.
Nisha Gilmore. I am one of the lead CCs for the Cleveland division of SAFI.
Good afternoon. I'm Faith Morehouse. I'm Assistant Executive Director of Ohio for SAFI, Specialized Alternatives for Families and Youth. And so SAFI, we've been involved with the Emergency Respite Program, similar to what Chip shared early on. And we are a foster care provider. We provide mental health services, adoption, and independent living services for youth. We've been a partner with Cuyahoga County for an extended period of time. We currently have foster homes in the Cleveland area, and we have the capacity to provide 3 respite beds for the county. We've been in existence in Cuyahoga since 1997, and we pride ourselves with the partnership that we have with the county. So I apologize that I did not have opportunity to formulate the statistics of the services that we've provided over the past years, specifically with Cuyahoga County. We probably serve about 140 youth in foster care, and ranging from all levels, 1 through 4, and then with the emergency respite program going up a little higher to specifically address the needs of those youth with the multi-system involvement.
So, and I didn't catch your first name.
Faith.
My sister's first. So a question in regards, I have several questions, but one of the questions in regards to SAFI, what specifically out of those 3 beds are they held for the multi-systemic children?
Yes, they are specifically held for the emergency respite.
And I don't know what that contract states, but so I guess in my mind, these are different families, right? Different homes that these children could go to.
We have multiple families that have, so to speak, raised their hands to say that they will participate in the program. Some of them have more than 1 bed that's available. So it could be 2 beds in 1 home. It'll depend on the referral.
When you talk about respite, what's that span of stay?
7 days, and then there could be a request for an additional 7 days.
Because we have a lot of emergency, and I believe in our contract, so it's nice to be hearing from someone. Is that contract designed where each individual family or participant in your organization, they can turn away a specific case or child?
They can. Our intent with the program was to have families to say yes, they would participate who did not have any youth in foster care in their home. That has not always been our experience. And so we have embraced families who said yes, they're willing to accept youth within the program. So there are times that the parent who's willing to accept a youth has a foster placement in their home. And so the referral may not be a good match for the family members or the foster care placement or whoever's in the family.
So it seems kind of, I get it. They're looked at as independent contractors, basically, the family, so they can accept who they need. How do we coordinate that? So we have placement staff. They reach out to you. They say, okay, I have the special needs child that needs to be placed. What happens after that?
So I'm gonna let Nisha take that.
So I oversee the program currently for the emergency respite. So in that scenario, if we have a child that's placed, all of our foster parents we have been familiar with. They have extensive training. All of them, I want to say on average, at least 10 years of foster parent experience. Generally, those kids that we find hard to place are the ones that are higher levels, so they have a higher level of needs. So once that's done, I review the tool. I do talk to the foster parent, if necessary, communicate with the social worker to see if there are specific needs, like something such as if the child has certain after-school activities or something that's still in place to make sure we can try while they're in this emergency situation to try to maintain a schedule and or the school that they're attending. So the matching is extremely important. We match it to make sure that to the best of our ability, they can actually stay for the placement for the 7 and possibly up to the 14 days if necessary. So we're gonna review the tool, speak with the foster parent, speak with the social worker, and then once the foster parent agrees, they take in the placement, and that's coordinated through the social worker for drop-off.
So you kind of have like a short list for each need, so you can just kind of speed dial.
Well, I want to say the county does provide us what we call a level of care tool, and that highlights kind of some of the special needs. I will say in our program, what's unique is we do have, like I've stated, our parents are trained, but we have meetings. So we meet about the kids. I contact them daily to see if there are any immediate needs. I go out within a 48-hour period to do a child welfare note on that child, make sure there's no emergency services, or, they do all come in with seeing a doctor prior to, but we want to make sure that there's nothing going on, like no bleeding, no emergency dental appointment, anything like that. And we make sure that we address those needs within between 48 to 72 hours, business hours, I will state.
Okay. And I had a question for Ohio Mentor that I asked them, and I can't remember it at the moment. So, any questions from my committee?
I just wanted to go back to the question that I'd asked her predecessors. With these foster families, it is incredibly important that their contact, especially in those 7 days, has real support that's structural and strong. And so how do we make sure, you made reference to the level of care tool. Does that tell us which of those parents have certain skill sets so that they can employ them as they interact with the child?
I want to state yes. I also want to just highlight, like, in the matching of them. So, for example, let's say that we have a youth that may be part of the LGBTQ plus community. We want to make sure that that foster parent is comfortable with that youth. So, in that case, then yes, we would make sure, okay, we're matched, that this is an appropriate placement of stay, and just to ensure the longevity of the placement. And in short, I will also say that it's important just to realize that the level of care tool is not always catching all of the needs.
Oh, we are. No surprise there.
Yes.
However, it is really important to know which parents have which skill sets.
Correct.
Especially with mental health problems.
Correct.
Because they're not always obvious.
Correct.
Especially when kids are used to presenting a tough exterior.
Exactly. And due to our training, all of our foster parents, they've had some type of trauma-informed care training. They all in our respite program, understand that this youth is coming in 9 times out of 10, highly exposed to a great deal of trauma. They, and some, depending on the level of care, may not have been in a home setting in a long time if they're coming from residential. So that's important as well.
As I asked the first gentleman from Ohio Mentor, how many families are prepared to accept these emergency care?
So we are growing our capacity currently. Our goal, I believe, is between 6 to 7 parents. It is for lack of a better words, a tough sell sometimes. Just to accept the child for one, but also that are willing to take the training. Like I said, we have meetings, special meetings that we do, that we provide. We provide additional trainings to our foster parents, and the support. You know, the foster parents want to feel supported. So making sure that, hey, it's okay for me to contact you every day, checking on this child, making sure that there are no immediate needs. And that's something that the foster parent is willing to accept.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. You also helped me remember my question. So, child leaving SAFI, do you also assist DCFS staff to find another placement or future placement?
Correct. So when a child is presented, we've actually had several placements that have come from emergency respite that we found an appropriate home for. And, you know, we've been able to provide additional resources and contacts with them. So we always, when it comes in, we look at what are some of the potentials. I like to call some of my foster parents matchmaker whispers, and they will literally say, I think this child would be really appropriate for such and such. And then we'll reach out and try to see if we can make that happen.
Very good. Any other questions from my colleagues? All right, seeing none, hearing none. Anything?
All right, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, we have one last presentation, and that's going to be from the center. So I'm going to invite Eric Morris to come up. As he comes up, I do believe he had a PowerPoint presentation and was going to ask to have that loaded. And so I'll ask Eric to come up. I do want to also acknowledge that there's an organization who the county's relationship with has changed most dramatically from my experience. It's Providence House. We've gone from really a possibly not being on the same page at the start of my time back with the county to clearly they're a strong partner of ours. I also just want to say that Ohio Mentor and SAFI represent what I think is sort of the most open future for us. Developing these respite beds, having providers be available for short-term placements, I think is a very, very exciting development because it is a less restrictive environment and it does allow us to spread these high needs across a broader network. So I'm very excited about the two of them. But I want to take a minute now and introduce Eric Morris from the CEO and ask him to share more about his proposal.
Hello again. I think I was just here. Eric Morse from the centers, and I have a couple others with me who will be speaking, so I'll have them introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, Carol Beatty with the centers.
Good afternoon, Martin Williams from the centers.
All right, so we have a short presentation. Most of it is going to be actually given by Carol because she's really, she's the one who had this inspiration. So I forgot I have control. So we talked about this the last time, just the quick overview of the centers. That we have health services, our family services, and our work services, and now through our acquisition of Cleveland Christian Home, providing children's residential services. So I'm going to turn it over to Carol.
Again, good afternoon. So we've heard the concerns. Not enough foster homes for youth with high needs, and youth that may have experienced multiple levels of trauma. We also know that youth impacted by trauma may have developed coping skills that don't work in the real world. This could be anything from hypervigilance, where they're constantly scanning the environment for danger because of the trauma they've experienced, which doesn't work in the classroom. Or it could be their heightened fight or flight mode, which in the greater community could mean they're getting suspended in fights or involved with the juvenile court system. So as a society, we can tend to respond and focus on the symptoms. But what if we took a different approach, especially for our most resilient and vulnerable youth in transition? What if the setting was one designed to provide them with a chance to recharge and begin or continue the healing process? Oops. Sorry, we've gone back. So part of what we're recommending is T-Suites or Teen Suites. With Teen Suites, we hope to provide a paradigm shift and a unique strategy of care for every 12 to 17-year-old that is referred, no exceptions. If we think of a teen or anyone close to us that has gone through a lot of trauma and may be having different symptoms, or even us, we need a place that will be there to support us. So we know that these youth require a specialized approach. And there's a reason that we're creating a trauma-informed environment. But we also know we will need highly trained staff that are trained not only once a year, but really every month. We know that we will need a low adult to youth ratio and an environment that's specially designed for teens that supports their feelings of safety and comfort. So we would include a predictable schedule within many opportunities where they can do everything from get schooling on site if needed, to having therapeutic pets, educational support, career path discovery, self-care, but always a supportive care team to be there to support them. We also would have quiet hours, but a 24/7 lounge area access. And this is because a lot of times youth facing trauma may not be able to sleep at night. So we want to make sure we have the team that's there to respond to them one-on-one. We also would include, of course, meal and snack options to meet their needs. And similar to other services at a hotel, but also with services to provide that support, we would have access to a therapist, a nurse, pharmacy, and other supports because we want to ensure their overall well-being. So our proposal includes, and I'm going to highlight just a few of these, providing 8 emergency beds for ages 12 really to 17. And definitely the piece I wanted to emphasize is not excluding anyone. We project to serve up to 100 male and female youth a year. Again, we would provide a low staff to youth ratio where we could do one-on-one if needed, but where we would do no more than one team person for every 2 youth. And then lastly, we will be looking at very competitive rates because we know it takes a special person to come and support the youth in this type of setting. And then lastly, we are going to be at the Cleveland Christian Home site, and we have already identified a wing there that we will be changing to reflect the approach we're taking. And I will turn it over to Eric now.
Thank
Can I
you.
ask a quick question? How long will the stay be?
As long as it needs to be. Can I raise this thing? There we go. I feel like I'm leaning down. So a question we often get is why the centers and do you have the skill and capacity to do this? And so just quickly listing some of our key staff members with the centers, including myself, who have experience doing residential treatment for children, certainly a lot of experience doing work with children and adolescents over our careers. And most importantly, and it's I don't know, like if you believe in God or not, but this really does seem like kind of a plan, right? That this opportunity and the opportunity to join with the Cleveland Christian Home came almost exactly at the same time, and really I don't think we could have done it without them. So the centers, we're bringing our behavioral health services, our family services, our health services, our FQHC services, our pharmacy, as well as our infrastructure, because we're a large organization for some of those basic kind of business operations, bringing that to the Cleveland Christian Home, which has 120 years of serving kids in our community at that location around West 114th and Lorraine. And their dedication to serving children over all these years and their great experience in serving children. So we think by coming together, we do have the knowledge, the resources, the creativity, and the vision to hopefully address this problem. We recognize this problem is really just a sliver of like the actual problem. In fact, it's more of a symptom than a problem. And so we plan to work really hand in hand with the county administration and all of the other service partners out there so that we can continue to build out a continuum that fixes the problem. So maybe we don't have to keep, do this forever. And I'm going to hand it over to Martin. So this was Carol's brainchild, but Martin is actually going to be the one in charge of making this happen. Martin is our Chief of Behavioral Health Services at the centers.
Thank you, everyone. We've posted for all the positions within the proposal, and I'm happy to say that we've received over 40 applicants for these positions, and we're really excited about that. The majority of them have experience with youth, residential services, trauma, as well as lived experience, which we're really excited about. We also are scheduling a job fair on October 12th at Cleveland Christian Home, really geared towards making sure that we can staff up this unit. And we've received a huge outpour of applicants who are planning to attend this event. So we're excited about that as well. The goal is to go to the event and being able to interview people immediately and seeing if we can actually offer jobs at that particular time. We've been doing a lot of interviews over the last few weeks. I'm glad to announce that we are in the final stages of hiring a director. And actually, I got an email earlier today saying that we have the director has accepted the position, which I'm happy about. We have a leader who's going to be able to lead the charge on developing this unit. And we also have offers out for 2 youth support specialists. And so hopefully we can hear about that in the next few days. As Carol said earlier, we have identified a space at the Cleveland Christian Home designated specifically for this unit. And we're looking forward to being able to renovate that space and being able to make sure that we have vendors who can actually provide us with the furniture that we need for that space. We're excited about this project. We're in the process of moving towards making sure that this is a safe and welcoming space for our children. So, thank you.
So it was mentioned that when I asked how long can children stay, and it was indefinite. So if we do have some children that will be staying that long, beds could fill up quickly, So are you intending on assisting DCFS in trying to locate another placement?
Yeah, we didn't work that into our proposal. That's not one of our roles, but we will be working with, the organizations that were just up here earlier, as well as the placement department at DCFS, providing information, certainly if there's opportunities for visits and other things that are necessary to help that child move on to their next stay, we'll do.
Because I think most of theirs were like temporary, and we have a lot of children in this county that has multi-systemic issues, so those 12 beds could fill up fast. So or 8. It was originally 12. Okay, 12 is in my head. They're comping us 4, David. It was in my head, so I misspoke. 8. So just think about that. How I know we were really trying to find a stable environment for these children because some of them can never return back home. It's,
Yeah. One of the things that we're excited about with Cleveland Christian Home, right now they only have 14 of their beds full. They have the capacity to serve over 50 children. We're looking forward to being able to help them fill the rest of those beds. And I think what we're looking at is how do we set up the beds to meet the needs in the community. And so if a child is at T-Suites and they need a higher level of care or a different level of care, and it doesn't exist in the community, maybe that's something that we create at the Cleveland Christian Home so they can have a more permanent place designed to meet their needs.
You'll be working with Director Fletcher.
Absolutely. Had a great meeting with her today.
Good. Any other questions?
I want to go back to some of my standard questions.
I've been trying to keep track.
Yeah, you did. You answered the capacity, which is 50. The specialized training you're hiring, is that what you're telling us? Mm-hmm. So you can't tell me unless you're telling me what your targets are. What are some of the skill sets you're targeting for the hires?
Some of the skill sets we're looking for, people who are experienced with trauma. That's have to be number one. Someone who has very good conflict resolution skills. Clients, individuals who are very experienced with behavioral health issues. We're looking to hire managers who are independently licensed, who worked with both adults as well as children, who can actually...
So when you say independently licensed in what? Because there's a world.
You are so right about that. Independently licensed social workers and counselors.
Well, what about mental health issues?
We're, part of the centers is that, as Eric talked about earlier, we have over 50 years of experience of providing behavioral health, substance use, trauma services. And so all of our staff will be trained on behavioral health issues. Many of the staff that we're bringing on will have that experience as well.
So, from my pedestrian perspective, a lot of the children who we see, unfortunately, at Jane Edna Hunter, have multiple sexual and mental health issues that lead them into behavior that we find appalling and they find totally acceptable. Mm-hmm. How do you break those kind of barriers? You're talking about T-suites being like a campus setting. It's not the other providers are talking about family-like settings. And we as Americans have a bias toward restoration to the family. How does this help us help these young people emerge back into society and be capable of creating families should they decide to have children?
The great thing about the staff that we're bringing on, they're going to have the experience with working with young people. And because of that, in the experience of our leadership, we feel that they're going to be able to build those relationships with those children and help them develop skills to help them be better once they leave the facility. Again, I have to continue to point out that throughout the centers, we have children and adolescents specialties around mental health, substance use issues, and providing trainings is going to help enhance the skill set of the workers that's going to be able to provide wraparound services for the kids. So I think our staffing, our training that we're able to provide to our staff to be able to educate the kids on addressing some of the issues that they may have will be instrumental in helping them live a better life after they transition out of T-suites.
So how much does T-suites cost? You're projecting how much for it to cost each year on average?
$6 million.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. This conversation, and I just wanted to apologize to our guests that are here to present, which we will bring you up shortly. This is a new contract. Hasn't been delved into before, so it's kind of not like routine, so we have a lot of questions for it. I don't know. I'm going to ask my committee if they're okay with moving this out. Do you feel comfortable, or because we do have someone else that is here to present, and I want to go to them, but
I know, Madam Chair, but T-Suites, I think, needs another conversation with
Okay,
us.
so we don't need to pass that today. We can have another conversation. I'm okay with that.
I feel it's institutional, but I know we need something new. Maybe it's just another more conversation with me to help me understand and learn better. You know that every time you introduce something new to people, they need a little time to adjust. So I read for the first time about this last week, and I'm like, And you sound like responsible and well-educated folks. So I'm hesitant to say no, but the way we have been taught to believe as public administrators, there's nothing better than the reunification of a family if it's achievable. And we, all of us in this room have been at this long enough to know that every family cannot be saved in the same way we would like for them to be saved. But what's important is making sure that children who are entrusted to us have the ability or skill sets at some point in time to develop their own healthy families. And how do I know that you're going to help the 50 kids who we're entrusting you with to develop some skills that will help them someday independently be good moms and dads?
Okay.
That's got to be built into there, I hope.
Councilwoman, may I suggest that we, because most of us have questions have been answered, and I want everybody to feel comfortable on every end. Can I suggest that we pass it with the, from this committee to the full council, allowing you
So
guys an
you
opportunity
had
to meet and discuss?
You had enough time you were comfortable with it? You had enough time you were comfortable with it? Okay. Then I will, if you'll wait till the end of the meeting, I'll give you a time that we can talk.
Okay. And if they don't get your answers or your questions in that time, then we can bring that up at council. Okay, at least it'll be moving through the chain. Because it is, another thing, it's not going to be passed at Tuesday because this is partial ARPA dollars. So it has to go 3 full readings. I just want it to kind of move through the process. So you have plenty of time, Councilwoman, to get all your questions answered. So I would like to call for a motion to move this legislation as substituted to the full council on second reading adoption. Is there a second or a motion?
So moved.
Okay, moved by Turner. Is there a second?
Sorry, Madam Chair, can I just clarify? It's not second reading adoption, it's just second reading?
Second reading, I'm sorry. Sorry. Thank you. Usually so I'll make the motion to move since Councilwoman Stevens still wants some clarification, I'll make the motion to move this legislation
Made
as
the motion.
substituted to the full council. Councilwoman Turner is seconding. I need a second. Dale can't vote on this.
No,
so.
I made the motion.
Okay,
You're
so
seconding.
Councilwoman Turner is making the motion, and I will give a second. All in, with one recusal, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Is there an
Aye for you.
aye? Okay, so we have 3 ayes and 1 recusal. Please get with the councilwoman. You have plenty enough time to get that taken care of.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can we please bring up our invited guests? And I just want to make a caveat that I forgot to mention earlier when UH was here. For those that watch or those that are in audience, anything that is connected with ARPA funding or is an ARPA grant application, it goes the 3 full readings, no exceptions. So I just wanted to let you guys know that it's got to follow through our legislative process before things get signed and come out to you. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Hello.
Sorry about that.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
We're really appreciative of the time and that you're squeezing us in at the end of your meeting. My name is Kirsty Muncie. I'm the president and CEO of the Collaborative to End Human Trafficking. And this is Rachel, and she'll introduce herself.
Good afternoon, Councilman and Council. My name is Rachel Socorro. I serve on the Survivor Advisory Board for the Collaborative to End Human Trafficking and am a program coordinator for them as well.
So really, we appreciate the opportunity, and we do have a PowerPoint. If we could get that loaded, that would be great. We do appreciate the opportunity to introduce ourselves to the council and the work of the collaborative and the role we play in our community. It's been, I feel, very serendipitous to be here today to hear about the amazing initiatives that are happening in our county. I've heard the word trafficking a couple times, and just want to share a little bit with you on how our work connects to all these initiatives and what we do at the Collaborative to End Human Trafficking. So the mission of the Collaborative to End Human Trafficking is to lead, empower, and connect our community to eradicate human trafficking. So making this horrific issue of human trafficking, this crime, this human rights violation go away is what we hope to accomplish in the future. And so obviously one of the ways we do that is to educate our community and bring awareness. And what makes me really happy to hear today is that, again, we've heard that word trafficking a few times. That means that there is a level of awareness in our community. This is a very underreported and under-recognized issue, and we have made a lot of connections today in the presentations before us that it causes traumatic, lots of trauma, and it causes a lot of trouble in our community and our society. So this is a very complex societal issue that we're dealing with, and so the way the collaborative addresses that is through awareness raising, through education, through training and technical assistance. But a key piece of the work that we do is collaboration and coalition building. So what we have done over the past 15 years that we have been in existence is build a very large table of providers, many of who have spoken today, to address this issue because there's so many nuances that are connected to human trafficking that we still don't understand because we've been only at this for about 2 decades. So to give you a little bit of history on human trafficking, I'll back up for a moment. No, it won't let me. A little bit of background on human trafficking. This really became an issue in our community federally when the Trafficking Victim Protection Act passed in 2000. Back then, we really didn't have a good word for this crime that was happening. But back in 2000, the federal government said, we see it everywhere. We see it in every community. We see it on the federal level. This is not an immigration issue. This is not an issue that happens in other countries. This is happening in the United States of America, and we must address it. And with the passing of the Trafficking Victim Protection Act, states started to look at that and say, yeah, we need to pass laws as well to address this. And so it's been primarily hands of law enforcement to address this. And it is a really unique time, again, to bring this into the human services field because there is so much connection and so much overlap. I will let Rachel tell you a little bit about what that looks like on the level of the experience of survivors and how it really plays out on the local level. And I don't want to bore you with too much language, but what we're finding in learning with this table, with the large coalition that we have, by the way, this is called Greater Cleveland's Coordinated Response to Human Trafficking. It's Cuyahoga County's Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition, which the collaborative is the backbone of. What we're learning and finding, and learning is really a lot of what we've been doing together, learning, exchanging information, is that the entry into the life of trafficking is very early. We see very young children get trafficked. We see that victims typically know their trafficker. This is not a situation with a white van kidnapping someone and taking them away. We see that family members, caregivers, domestic partners are the ones who are often creating the trafficking situation. So this is a billion-dollar industry that we're looking at, and we're seeing the levels that come together when it pertains to law enforcement, social services, and health and human services obviously overlap. So I'll turn it over to Rachel to share a little bit about what she's going to share.
Thank you. I appreciate your audience today, and we can take down the PowerPoint, please. As Kirsty's just presented to us, the numbers we see a significant increase. She stated that it's a billion, I think 16 is about right, $1 billion industry. And we also heard it today in the other presentations of other community members and community partners. I want to give a different approach.
That song, but it's loud.
Yeah, it is.
It's like,
It's okay.
we're up here on the 8th floor. It's got to be loud.
Isn't that certain? Right.
Sorry about that.
We see the significant increase. We see it in all facets of trauma that we are recognizing, identifying, and addressing as a community, as you are as a council. And we see it not only in the statistics, but in the city, in the community. I want to give you a different lens. I'm here today to help encourage you. I myself am a survivor of human trafficking. I lived 15 years in domestic servitude. I am what human trafficking looks like in our communities. What I want to share, what we noticed about the numbers yesterday was, yes, there's an increase, but could it be that there's also an increase in awareness, that we are doing our jobs, that we are servicing our communities, that the systems are beginning to work, as you stated, Councilwoman? And we've done a wonderful job at raising awareness and educating and training. I heard the director of Children's Services say that, that there's a gap or there's a stagnation in her programming, and we heard it repeatedly as the different presenters brought their agendas before us today. And I am encouraged and here to encourage you today because I believe we can help or maybe building the answer to some of that. Obviously, our lane is human trafficking, but we have a unique new dynamic. And awareness is not enough. It comes to a point where it's not enough to know that we must apply. And what we're hearing repeatedly in our community partners and in our actions is that how, now what? We know, we're aware, we see the numbers are growing, now what? And I smile because yes, we're seeing an increase in trafficking, yes, we're seeing an increase in the numbers, but I have to believe it's also because we're becoming more aware, so we know there's more. It's always been there. It is growing, but we're becoming more aware. And how do we now implement what we've learned? How do we layer services? How do we connect partnerships? How do we build relationships? How do we facilitate trust and unity? And the Greater Cleveland cohort is the answer to that. I am here today as a proud ambassador beside our CEO to present that to you. What we need is partnership, presence, and connection. The collaborative is building a nexus, a network of community leaders, service providers, government officials, law enforcement, education, to connect all those dots so we can layer those services. It takes a coordinated response, and we're building that system. And we're implementing it in the city of Cleveland. It's spreading over Northeast Ohio. We're confident we'll see it duplicated in the state, and we're excited about how we hope to be, we know we will be, the blueprint for the nation. And I am so confident because I am a recipient of the services that they have been so diligently working on. I'm here today empowered, employed, have a voice, and can make a significant impact because of the services, the program that the collaborative has continuously been developing over the years. What we know and what we hope to do are three key things, and that is develop that unity and trust through relationships with our partners. We need partnership. We will educate and empower our partners to be impactful, so that we stop seeing those gaps in services, that we, I heard, forgive me, their name escaped me. They just presented for housing. I heard her answer. I'm sorry?
Ohio Mentor.
The one after that. Yes, Providence House. Councilwoman asked an amazing question about how do you address the needs of children that are trafficked. I know their demographic is very young, but we are the answer. All of the people that presented to you today need educated, empowered to make an impactful difference in the community members they service and provide. The collaborative, the Greater Cleveland cohort has that answer where we're the ones they can pick up the phone and call and say, how do we service this? And if we don't have the answer, we have the network we have the door for them to go to get that answer to walk through. How it happens is so dynamic. How do you think it's $1 billion industry? It's so dynamic.
They have a network.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. The mind of a trafficker, I always say that, is so, yes, they have a network. But how it happens is so dynamic, so how we address it has to be dynamic. And the coordinated response is the answer to that. And the collaborative is honored to be the front runners, the pioneers of that mission. We will do it. Collectively, though, it will take a coordinated response. We need your partnership, your presence, and we need connections. Thank you for your time.
And Christian, I didn't get your last name.
Muncey.
How you spell that?
Mouncey. So it's very hard to add anything to what Rachel just said, but I do want to underline a couple key points. And one is that we believe that only if we have survivor voices present at the table, helping us understand how this issue truly unfolds and how we can support survivors, will be successful. We believe that a lot of the work in the anti-human trafficking field is done on the federal and the statewide level. We believe that we can bring that work to the local level. We need to build systems that support this work. One example, Ohio Attorney General Yost right now is investing and pushing a statewide data collection system around human trafficking so we better understand the prevalence. We have a lot of research that is happening across the state around vulnerability factors that lead to trafficking, which you have heard today, many of. We need to better understand how this trafficking dynamic exists and how we can interrupt it. And I think as the collaborative to end human trafficking that takes a collective approach, we can contribute to a prevention system in our county that can work right alongside with our providers. Again, we want to empower our providers with best practices. We want to support our providers with tools and resources so they can do what they do best. And we want to work alongside them to create that prevention system that will help us better understand how to end human trafficking in our community. So I think that's what we wanted to share with you today.
Yes, thank you. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, Director, do you have written ideas of your prevention techniques and your needs that you just spoke of about the systems and,
Yeah, we believe it starts with creating a data collection system. We agree with Attorney General Yost that we do not have a good grasp of the prevalence and how deep truly this issue is. We need to better understand where it lives, how it keeps moving, how these dynamics
but how
exist.
does our government on the local level, I'm looking for, like, you guys have obviously talked about this with your various partners, to let us in on what your needs are. You're like, what is your timeline? What is your trajectory? Where are you trying to go? And so the different agencies and we can interject where we see that we can play a role, just so we have the grander picture. Do you have something like that?
So one of the thoughts we have on that is that, of course, your support would mean authority for us as an organization, would really elevate the issue of human trafficking. That is definitely a need we have. I think in everything you've heard today, all the needs that kids have, human trafficking sometimes gets underestimated and doesn't get the attention it deserves. So helping us elevate the issue and bringing it to the forefront of people's minds, helping create those tables and bringing the right people to it. We have one example that you could directly support if that is a choice but we have a youth summit coming up. We believe that one of the roles we play is to bring together leaders in our community from these multi-systems that you spoke today of, to have these conversations. We need these people with all that knowledge, all that information to come together and create that collective impact that we so need on creating new solutions for our county. So the collaborative can create those spaces and can move that work forward, but we need everyone's collective impact in that process.
And what date is the youth summit?
We're holding it in early January or mid-January. We don't have a date determined yet, but we will in the next few
So
days.
January 2023?
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilman.
I appreciate very much your presentation and know of the wide-scale prevalence and significance of this issue. I'd like to get a little bit more granular understanding. Suppose that you have this the system in place. You have a lot of partners. You have connections. You have a lot of people that are committed and suppose that one of these people becomes aware of a youth that they believe has been trafficked. What are the action steps? What do they do?
Right now, currently, is that your question? What they do currently?
No, what is the recommended course of action? When we have a good system in place, how would someone be who becomes aware of a person likely being trafficked, how would they try to help that person?
So in our visionary world, we hope that every door that youth would enter, in every of those doors, there's appropriate screening mechanism in place to identify this person as a trafficking victim or survivor. At every entrance, and I'm saying law enforcement, social service organization, hospitals, the juvenile justice system, at any of those doors, there is a plan in place, this coordinated response that we're talking about, where either this entity is equipped to take care of that youth in that moment as a human trafficking survivor, or knows the next door to direct that person to.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, to help my colleague out. What if I go to 7-Eleven today and see the same little girl that I saw there 2 weeks ago talking to men I find rub me the wrong way?
Yeah.
What do I do?
Oh, yeah, please.
I asked her
You're
if
ready.
I could give my input because it was a smart sheriff who assisted me in exit. And there were no systems in place at that time. And he didn't have the tools or equipping to identify me as a trafficking victim. And I'm a victim of labor trafficking predominantly, not sex trafficking. Ideally, as you spoke to a councilman, and like you said, what would you do if you picked up the phone and called the collaborative or one of our partners to say what you saw, or if a system were in place when I walked into the Summit County, at that time, Sheriff's Department? What our passionate belief is, our vision is that if at that point of contact I made with the sheriff, or for your say, you walk that little girl into or usher her into a place, one of those touch points that, like our partners presented today, there is an immediate action plan in place.
So will every police department be able to help me?
We have already
So
begun.
I'm in
Yes, we
Cleveland
have already.
Heights.
Yes,
That's
we've
my
begun
base.
those efforts.
Do I go to the front desk in City Hall and say, "This is what I think I saw"?
Yes.
Who helps me?
We have already begun efforts to train the police departments. We've started with North Olmsted. We have Strongsville on our roster, and we are making continuous connections. The Cuyahoga County Sheriff's Department is helping us significantly.
Because many times trafficking is not uncovered because
Correct.
people don't, they want to be helpful, but then they're like, it's not my business, and there's no clear place for them to go to say, am I just imagining these things, or what are the identifiers? And they just need a number to call.
That's it. Thank you, Councilwoman. The most prominent piece of feedback we got from the North Olmsted Police Department was, We're so grateful for your work and your program because after our presentation, they expressed to us, we see this all the time. We don't know what it is, and we walk away from these encounters or these interactions with our community members saying, what do we do? Or now what? Or if, for example, like your example, they're picking up teens who are squatting in buildings or staying at hotels throughout the city over and over again, they're seeing repeated patterns. But they don't get involved and they don't take action because they don't have the answer to now what. This coordinated response we're developing and the programming at the collaborative is the answer to now what. They will now have someone to call. They will be foretrained. They will have foresight. They will be able to identify, and they'll have a diverse, collective network of answers to whatever that person, when it comes down to it, it's about the survivor in front of them that needs the services. The collective impact will give every different touch point a place to go, a nucleus to go, a center to say, to give that person what they need.
Great question, Dale.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Continue, Councilman.
I had one more question, which is, what does the prevention program look like? How do we stop people from being trafficked in the first place?
So a very good question, and there are various avenues that are being explored on the statewide level. The last one, we really are hoping to take a lead on the statewide level as well as the local level. There is definitely a lot of work done on demand reduction that is happening, that the AGs really pushes. We're really working on buyers and identifying why this issue is happening in the first place. But again, that is a business that it will be very hard to break. But feeding that pipeline and really working on why these vulnerabilities happening in the first place, really going upstream and working with all the partners, again, that presented today to think about how do we assure that children are not going into foster care, are not running away, are not sexually abused. All these predictors, all those factors that lead to trafficking in the first place, we want to create a system that can help prevent that in the first place. Obviously, that is a long-term vision and dream for us, but that's really what we're hoping. While in sync, we still obviously work with our law enforcement partners on all the other avenues as well.
I think this is a good question and speaks to your question, Councilwoman, as Christy highlighted. The answer, in short, is to eliminate the vulnerabilities that lead to a trafficker exploiting a person. Traffickers are traffickers. They look at people as any other commodity. And it's the exploitation of a human being's gifts, time, talent, and treasure is what traffickers are after. We know that if we can help support the wellness of people, offer wraparound services to the other organizations that some of them were here today, and help, and I think this answers your question, how can the council support us? How do you get involved with us? By empowering us, I don't have all of the technical answers, that's for our director, but by funding us, by getting our word out, because the answer is to eliminate the vulnerabilities, reduce them. And if we have a coordinated response, we can reduce vulnerabilities, and that can reduce exploitation. That is the answer in brevity.
Do you have with the partners that you have now, do you have a MOU or a partnership agreement formulated?
Yes, we do have a partnership agreement for partners to be a part of our anti-human trafficking coalition, yes.
Can you send that to the clerk?
Absolutely, I'd love to.
And also a list of who your current partners are?
Yes, yes.
Is DCFS one of your current partners?
DCFS is one of our current partners, yes.
Okay. And are they helping with, because I think this is a public health crisis.
This is a public health crisis, yes.
I don't know how do we take it from local government, from what you guys are doing, to get it to the national level, because this should have been, this is worldwide. It should definitely be on every billboard and news and, you know, to make people more vigilant if they're at an airport, if they see something, you know.
Yes.
So we will get there, and
Yes.
hopefully we can help you get further along. Is there anything else you'd like to share? And again, I apologize. When you set a presentation up a couple of months in advance, you never know what that legislation is going to end up like. Usually it's quick, but it just so happens that this emergency child care
Divine
placement.
alignment. It was meant for us to be here with them.
Okay.
We so appreciate you taking the time. We really appreciate you listening to our issue and the impact we make in the community. And we hope that you will consider us as part of this network as a resource for you as well. We will continue the work of learning together and advancing our community. And we want to be a partner to anyone who can help eliminate these vulnerabilities. We will create that prevention approach with the support of our partners.
Okay, can you leave your business card?
And obviously, we'll circulate the summit as well, the Thriving Youth Summit.
I was going to offer my input on that. I had the opportunity, Kirsty gave me the opportunity to work with Case Western Reserve University on the Youth Summit. And why it's so prominent and important to us is because we know how early back it starts, and we believe that will be our touch point of prevention. If we can teach, educate and empower young people about their proposed vulnerabilities. That's okay. They can self-protect, and that will be a huge piece of prevention. If I had an awareness, just from a survivor's voice, of who I was, what my purpose was, and where I was going, I could have better protected my time, talent, and treasure, and probably, or at least reduced some of my exploitation. Youth will be a huge part of our prevention model. When people, young people especially, know who they are and what they're worth, it's a lot harder to exploit them. So we're excited about the prevention model. We know it will be impactful.
Thank you again.
Quick comment, Madam Chair.
Yes.
I just wanted to again thank you for being here today. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for sharing your story. It was just about 15 years ago that I was on the staff of U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown's office. Homeland Security was one of my casework areas, and I remember at that time everybody was like, what is human trafficking? It was a very new thing, and it was often confused with just prostitution.
Right.
And I'm shocked to see that we are still trying to connect all of these nexus. And I was most familiar with their Blue campaign.
Yes, that's how I identified.
Office of Partnership and Engagement. So I was wondering, do you have any interaction with that office?
Yes, so there is quite a large and very connected network on the federal level, and that campaign and that office is a big part. And really, it's again that learning together, creating new ideas. There's lots of creative thinkers that again really starting with identifying data as one of the biggest gaps that we have of really identifying prevalence and this vulnerability data. So that's really where we're moving to. But again, there is so much connection to the federal level with these offices and statewide as well that I feel like we have great traction to make big change.
But thank you for your service.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Turner, I just want to add and to speak to my director's commitment. It was that Blue campaign where I identified in January of 2019. And I was 2 years out of trafficking. I didn't know that I had been technically trafficked until I participated in a Blue campaign. And then reconnecting with our government level at Sherrod Brown's office is how I got to the collaborative. And Kirsty answered the phone. So I'm here today free and rehabilitated, but then also empowered and employed because of the efforts of that office and the collaborative. So it's working.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I apologize to the Committee, Education and Sustainability. I didn't see my colleague come down, so I thought there was nobody here for them. I apologize. So I wish I would have saw her and I would have known that she was So this is no miscellaneous business. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.